Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Irene Anthony. I'm the Senior International Student and Scholar Coordinator here at ISSS. And usually, if you've sat in on this presentation before, I am joined by Jeremy Spoor, who is the Assistant Director of our Office for Client Services. But unfortunately, Jeremy is under the weather today, sorry to say. So I am flying solo. So forgive me for any mistakes that I may make. And Jeremy's not here to correct me. Um, so since I am flying solo, what we're going to do, usually Jeremy will answer questions in the chat during the presentation. I won't be able to do that while presenting. So feel free to put questions in the chat, but I will wait until the end of the presentation and respond to them at that time. Okay, so let us get started. This is, as the slide says, the J-1 Exchange Visitor Workshop for Penn administrators. And really the goal is to give you a little bit of more information about the J-1 program, what it is, the application process, things that you as a BA or a Penn administrator need to be mindful of during a J-1 stay here at Penn. Okay. So we start with this, the spirit and intent of the J-1 program. This slide, I feel, encapsulates the program. This is from the regulatory language of the J-1 program, which was created to increase mutual understanding between people of the United States and people of the other countries by means of educational and cultural exchange. So it really the program was developed and created in the aftermath of World War II in the years following as kind of a soft public diplomacy initiative on the part of the US government to kind of bridge communication between people of the United States and other countries. And so that it wasn't just government heads talking, but people got to know each other on a personal level by Americans traveling overseas and doing research, or foreign nationals coming to the United States to do their research. So that was the impetus behind it. And it kind of governs the whole process of J-1 sponsorship. And I'll refer back to this slide throughout today's presentation, but just kind of wanted to set the stage from the get-go about the spirit and intent of the program. So as it says on this slide, the J-1 program is intended for temporary exchange of foreign nationals coming to the United States. So really the end goal is that they come to the United States, they do their research and hone their skill set. They also learn something about the American people and our culture. Likewise, they impart some of their culture to the Americans that they meet during their stay. So the full title of the program is the J-1 Educational and Cultural Exchange Program. So really to fulfill the spirit and intent of the program, they come in, do their work, but then go back home. I know a lot of times people will come kind of, to bridge their time in the United States. They might come in as a J-1. But really, the intent behind the program is for them to go home and share with their fellow countrymen what they learned about in the United States. It is run by the U.S. Department of State as a cultural and educational exchange program. The Department of State has J-1 federal regulations that they have codified, and that is kind of the playbook by which Penn administers its J-1 program. So all these rules that we're talking about today in today's presentation, those aren't Penn rules. Those are Department of State rules. They are regulatory. So it's very important that Penn, as the J-1 program sponsor for this university and our office in particular, adhere to these requirements and regulations in order to maintain not only our sponsorship designation by the Department of State, but also to ensure that the J-1 applicant and exchange visitor is maintaining their visa status while in the U.S. The last tile there, the J-1 Exchange Visitor Information is managed through SEVIS. That is the Student Exchange Visitor Information System. That is a government database. So when you submit the application in IPEN and we refine it and look at it and tweak it, that is the information that is uploaded to the SEVIS record, individualized SEVIS records for each J-1. and if they have any, J-2 dependents. And it's from there that we will issue the DS 2019 forms, which, again, if you don't know what those are, we will get to those shortly. Okay. So within the J-1 program, the Exchange Visitor Program, which again, overseen by the Department of State, there are 15 categories of J-1 participants or exchange visitors. This sampling is some of the ones that Penn has been designated to sponsor by the Department of State. There are other types of J-1 exchange visitors. There's your au pair, camp counselors, K through 12 students, that type of thing. But again, 15 categories, but the Department of State has designated us as sponsor, and our ability to entertain sponsorship for individuals who are fitting each of these types of categories. So we're going to go over each one on today's presentation, starting with J-1 professors and researchers. And we kind of blend those two together because they're kind of very similar. They're separate categories, but their intent to be in the United States is somewhat similar. And that is to, and it's underlined, to engage in research, teaching, observing, consulting in connection with a research project, and lecturing. So it has to be for a bona fide teaching activity. It cannot be for like clerical or administrative work. It really has to be a bona fide research activity. The minimum stay as a research scholar is 3 weeks, and they are allowed up to a maximum of 5 years of sponsorship, as long as the activity is continuing. The Penn department is continuing to want to act as host, and there is sufficient funding for their stay. Another category that we sponsor are short-term scholars, J-1 short-term scholars. They're kind of a mini version of a research scholar in that same thing. They're here to lecture, observe, do research, but they are only allowed a maximum of 6 months. So they can be here for 1 day to 6 months maximum. At the end of that time, we cannot extend beyond that 6 months. Again, that is regulatory. So the true intent of the person's participation should fit within a 6 month period, because as the next slide says, it's not intended kind of as a lookover, meaning you don't want to bring them here as a short-term scholar to see if they would be good for like a postdoc position, because that's not the purpose of the short-term scholar category. The purpose is for them to come temporarily, short-term, go back home, spirit and intent of the program. So if for whatever reason, they come here as a short-term scholar and the PI wants them to come back, one, there would have to be a 6-month gap between when they leave and when they can return as a J-1 short-term scholar. And very importantly, and this has been stated by the Department of State, there has to be a different program objective. So if they came to do research on an amoeba in their first day, when they come back, they have to be doing something. They have to be doing research on a different kind of amoeba, and there's going to have to be a clarification from the PI as to how is that program different. Again, going back to the spirit and intent of the program, the goal is for people to go back home and share with their fellow countrymen what they've learned in the United States. If they keep coming back to the United States, it's kind of circumventing that whole intent of the J-1 program. Get rid of that. So likewise, if someone comes as a J-1 research scholar, they would need to be gone for like 6 months before they could come back as a short-term scholar. And again, with a different program objective. They can't be continuing, oh, I didn't finish it within 5 years. I need to come back and just finish it up. No, it has to be for a completely different program objective. Okay, another category that we sponsor are J-1 student interns, and these are predominantly for individuals who are enrolled in a degree-seeking program in their home country. And an internship is required for them to graduate from that program that they're in their home country, and that there has to be an agreement between Penn and their home institution. So again, this is for individuals who are getting their bachelor's degree, because for a research scholar, professor, and a short-term scholar, they all must have a minimum of a bachelor's degree in the field in which they are coming to Penn to do their research. J-1 student interns do not. They can be pursuing their bachelor's degree or higher degree, but they must be enrolled in a degree seeking program outside the United States in their home country. J-1 student interns are allowed up to 12 months of sponsorship per degree level. And as I mentioned already, the two bullets, there has to be an agreement between Penn and their home institution, and it's more applicable to individuals who have not completed their bachelor's degree yet. Okay, so some things you want to consider when you're entertaining or looking at potentially bringing in someone who's going to be a J-1 scholar or student intern. You're going to want to look at their immigration history. Have they been in the United States before? If so, how long, in what visa classification? Because they may not be eligible for returning as a J-1. What are their academic credentials? As I mentioned, they have to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree, except for the student intern. Where's the source of funding coming from? Is it from Penn? Is it from their home country? Is it personal? They also, by regulation, have to have insurance coverage, medical and health insurance coverage that meets the minimum requirements of the J-1 program as set by the J-1 federal regulations. And I'll go into that a little bit later. Again, what is their intent of coming to the United States? Are they going to be working on different things, or are they coming for like one primary program objective? Because it really needs to be for that. They can't come in and say, oh, I'm doing some biology, but now I'm going to move to something completely different. I mean, it doesn't happen often that we would get that question, but their primary objective has to remain the same. And then also, before they can actually start working at Penn or being placed on payroll, if you're going to get paid by them, they have to be in J-1 status. If they are here under Penn sponsorship, if they are here in another visa classification or under another school's sponsorship, they cannot start at Penn until our office has allowed them and issued the appropriate documentation to them to allow them to start work at Penn. Okay, another thing you want to consider is, does your school have a particular policy about this? School of Medicine, for example, has a policy regarding visiting scholars. They have to have letters from their home country if they're coming in for a year, confirming it they're being allowed to stay for a year. Sometimes the School of Medicine will not allow them to be extended beyond a 2-year maximum. So each school has its little bit of different policy. If you're not sure, as it says, check with your dean's office. And some important knots for the J-1 program. It cannot be for a staff position. It cannot be permanent. It cannot be administrative or clerical in any nature. Another thing, it cannot be tenure track or for tenured faculty appointments. Trainees cannot be for trainees, and by that specifically medical trainees. So it's, as the other bullet says, no clinical activities or training. Some incidental patient care is allowed, but it has to be overseen by a Penn physician, that activity or interaction, and there's a separate information that's required for that. Excuse me. Okay. So now we're going to talk about documents and regulatory requirements of the J program. So when you are submitting an application in IPEN, at some point you're going to be uploading the documents from Penn or a lot of times from the individual's home country. Please remember that anything that is not in English, you can upload it in its home language, but there needs to be an English translation accompanying it. I myself am not well versed in many languages, so it's not even for me though. It's also in case we are ever audited by the Department of State. We have to have documentation on file that shows the English translation. Likewise, if they are being funded outside of Penn by their home country or personal funding, That needs to be, if it's like, for example, from their home country, it needs to be on letterhead from that entity. It needs to have a current date on it. It needs to talk about the dates that the funding is valid for and the dollar amount. If it's in their home country currency, it needs to be accompanied by a currency conversion chart that shows what the equivalent is in US dollars. Also, the signature has to also indicate who is signing, what is the title of that person, and their name kind of typed out. So it's not just the signature, but the printed name and that person's title. So the minimum funding requirements for this year is per scholar J-1 is $34,068. If they have any J-2 dependents, it would be an additional $500 per month for the spouse and $334, I believe, for each J-2 child, dependent child. If they're coming in as a postdoc, their levels of funding must meet the requirements of the postdoc levels that are posted on the university website. Okay, so health insurance requirements. Again, this is regulatory. This isn't Penn saying that they have to have all this. They have to have where it says the third bucket down must meet the following. Those are in the regulations as to the prescribed levels of coverage. All J1s and their company J2 dependents must have. Again, very regulatory. If they are coming in on a postdoc, in a postdoc position, the good news is the postdoc plan offered here at Penn that J1 postdocs and their J2 dependents are eligible for does meet these J1 requirements. So that's the good news. If they're coming in as a visiting scholar, they have two options. They can either purchase insurance through Gallagher. We kind of partner with them. They are an insurance company. All the options they have for insurance coverage meets the J1 requirements and J2 requirements. Alternatively, if the J1 applicant has alternative insurance from their home country, that's fine, but they still must submit information in the Gallagher portal because it's going to be up to Gallagher to review that information. They are the health and benefits experts, so they're going to make sure whatever insurance the person is showing does indeed meet the requirements of the J1 program. Because as the J1 designated sponsor here at Penn, we have to confirm that J1s have insurance for themselves and J2s that meet the requirements of the J1 program. For if a J1 is not maintaining that health insurance, and that's considered a willful violation of the J1 program and can be grounds for termination of the J1 program. So you may be on the receiving email of emails I have sent out to J1s. I CC the business administrators, Penn administrators, to remind them, hey, we're getting notification from Gallagher. You don't have the required levels of insurance. Please, respond to Gallagher as soon as possible. So that's happens twice a month. I get a list from Gallagher. So if I'm CCing you on that email, please make sure you're following up with the J1 because it's very important that they maintain their insurance. Okay, another regulatory requirement is the English language proficiency requirements. Again, this is in the J1 federal regulations that Penn, as program sponsor, has to establish an objective measurement, quote unquote, in the regs that confirms that the individual has a sufficient level of English proficiency that will allow them to participate effectively in the J1 program, right? So if they can't speak English to a certain level, how are they really going to benefit from the program? So it's not, they have to evidence this before they come in on the J1. Penn has created two means by which they can do this. They can either that they've mastered a certain level of their English through a TOEFL test or an equivalent test, and they're listed on our website what those tests are that we would accept and the minimum score we would require. They have to be done within the last 2 years. Alternatively, the Penn English Language Program here at Penn provides an oral proficiency interview. So if you want to use that instead, Kate Kinney over at the ELP is more than happy to talk to you about it if you have any questions. But you would need to arrange an appointment. It can be an online appointment between the J-1 applicant and the ELP so that they can administer that interview. Once it's done, the ELP will issue an English letter saying they've passed or haven't passed. But 9 times out of 10, they've passed. So that obviously we will accept. Some other things that we will require or accept are as if the person has a passport from a country where English is the official language, such as, UK, Canada, things of that. So that's another option. Okay, so we have some new forms that have been placed on our website recently. One is for anyone who is coming to the vet school. If you click on that form or on that link, you will see where it brings you up to a form that has text. It's a template. The text of that has to be transferred onto vet school letterhead and signed by the chair of the department and the PI who will be overseeing the J-1 participant in their program. And again, this is regulatory. We've just taken the language that the Department of State has asked us to confirm. Who better to confirm than the department chair and the PI that all these things are going to be in effect for the J-1 applicant. If someone is a medical doctor in their home country, then we also need, again, by regulation, what's called the physician's dean's. So the dean has to, or the dean's prescribed signatory has to sign off on this form. So before this spring, we were getting letters that they weren't signed by the dean. They were kind of willy-nilly. So we ended up kind of streamlining the process. So there is, where it's underlined here, you can click on that, and that gives kind of a link to the School of Medicine process about where you can get this letter and how to start getting the ball rolling. But basically, it has to be signed by both the dean of the medical school or their authorized signatory and by the PI who's going to be overseeing the J-1. So two new forms and processes this year. Okay, another thing that has always been going on is the virtual compliance check. That is in part 1 of the e-form. Just make sure you're actually fulfilling that requirement, because if you're saying, yes, we went through virtual compliance and you haven't, that's a problem. So just make sure you're doing that. If you have any questions about that, that's the website, or I'm sorry, the email address that you can reach out to ask any questions. expatcontrol@list.up.edu. All right, so let's talk a little bit just about the timeline involved. So once you have submitted the application in IPEN and included all the supporting documentation as required, keep in mind that you want to give us at least 3 to 4 months in advance of when the person's supposed to be here. Not only does that give us time to review it, but it's also going to give time for the individual to apply for the J-1 visa at the U.S. consulate if this is a new applicant and they haven't arrived yet. Keep in mind, if applications are submitted in IPEN less than 30 days prior to the start date, there's going to be a late fee that is charged by our office. We're currently taking about 3 weeks, sometimes shorter, depending on our workload, to process these types of applications. Once it is approved, we will issue the DS 2019, and that's what you see on the right-hand side of the screen, the sample. And on it that's what I was mentioning earlier. That's what's printed from the CVIS record after we have reviewed it and you've submitted it. We update it, upload it to CVIS, and that's the form that gets printed. So it goes over their biographic information, the time frame of when their sponsorship is going to be here at Penn, their subject field code, what they're supposed to be doing here, where they're going to be, and it has our signatures on it. Me, Charmaine Sin, and Tracy Martin are the three that usually sign these. We will then email it to the J1 and we'll CC you as the BA. And it's a lengthy email with a lot of instructions in it and with links, but it's really important that the J1 reads that and clicks on the links because it provides a lot of information that they, as a J1, need to know, one, to get their visa, but also two, to maintain their visa status once they're here in the United States. It's how to adhere to regulations and maintain their visa status. Okay, so basically how it works is once the DS 2019 has been sent to the J1, they are instructed to pay the $220 CVIS fee online through DHS. That doesn't come through our office. There might be some visa fees also involved that they have to pay as well in addition to that. They will schedule an interview at the U.S. consulate for their J visa, and they are allowed to enter 30 days prior to the start date on their DS 2019 form. If for any reason there are going to be any delays or the person is not coming, just there is in IPEN in that individual's record where you can submit a late arrival form or you can cancel if they're not coming at all. Just keep us apprised of that. If it's getting closer to the date and they're still not here or it's past that date, we will eventually reach out to you and say, is this person coming or not? So U.S. consulates are only located outside the United States. That's where visas are issued. And that's why I was saying it's probably better to start earlier in the application process as opposed to later, because then it buys the applicant all that much more time to apply to the consulate for the visa, because processing times, especially now, kind of vary from consulate to consulate. So it's very difficult to ascertain, any one common processing time. They're all very different depending on the country. So once the visa application is submitted and the interview takes place and the visa is issued, this is what a visa looks like. So it has the individual's name on it, face on it, their name, birth date, and you can see it has a certain validity period. In this particular case, it looks like the expiration date was March 16th, 2006. This is an outdated photo. And it also says, visa type, it says J1. So they're allowed to, enter the United States. They have to have the DS 2019 printed out along with the visa. That's what they're going to use to enter the United States. So the visa, that stamp that you see as issued by a U.S. consulate, that can expire while they are in the United States. Its only use is if you are physically outside the U.S. and the J1 wishes to enter the United States in that visa classification. So that's, you might hear on the news sometimes, they were here and their visa had expired. Well, that's okay. As long as their DS 2019 hasn't expired, they're participating in the program, that's okay. If they subsequently travel again outside the United States, they would need to apply for an updated visa. Because again, if you're physically outside the United States, you have to have a valid visa to re-enter. And just going back for a second, that doesn't, for Canadian citizens and for Bermuda citizens, you do not need a valid visa. Gets a little confusing. There's always an exception to the rule. And also, if they're traveling, once they've arrived in the United States and then they travel to Canada or Mexico for less than 30 days, they don't need a valid visa, but just adding that in there. Okay, so once they enter the United States, they're going to be issued what's called an I-9 form, arrival departure record. And as you can see on the right, this is an example of someone who came in on a B, not as a J. But you can see the date they entered was, in this particular case, April 11th, 2012. That's near the bottom. Their class of admission is B1. And then the admit until date, kind of near the top, says October 10th, 2012. So for J1, you always want the admit date to be in, say, J1 DS. That stands for duration of status. So that just keep that in mind. You always want an I-94 card to say class of admission J1, admit until date DS for duration of status. Um, this is a reflection when they come in, the consular or the border patrol agent has looked at it, looked at the J visa and said, okay, this class of admission, the person's here as a J1, and that's what conveys their visa status or their purpose of being here. So the visa in their passport is what gets them here. The visa status is what their J1 status is what is conveyed or bestowed upon them once they're here based on what their I-94 card says and their Form DS 2019 form. Okay, so again, you can be in the United States with an expired visa, but you cannot be here with an expired DS 2019. That's the difference. The 2-year home residency requirement and the 12 and 24-month bar, I'm not going to go into detail about that other than to say, just keep in mind when someone is here as a J1 or has been a J1, it can affect their ability to come back to the United States. So keep that in mind. One of the things I mentioned at the beginning was some things to take into consideration was immigration history. Because depending on what they were doing previously in the United States, it may inhibit their ability to come back as a J1 or an H1 or other visa classifications. So once the J1 has arrived to the United States, we have like an online orientation for them. They have to log into IPEN and complete that information within 10 to 14 calendar days. If not, we'll start chasing them, saying, why haven't you checked in? Because we can see that they've arrived. So it's really important that they log into IPEN after their arrival and submit their arrival information, which will include a copy of their I-94 card and a copy of their visa, and they watch a tutorial basically. Once that has happened, our office staff will review those documentations just to ensure that the individual has indeed arrived in the appropriate visa classification as a J1. And we will validate their CVIS record, meaning we will make their CVIS record turn from initial status to active status. Once we've done that, we will issue a travel validated DS 2019 form, meaning it's been signed by us twice. The second time would be for travel if they have subsequent travel outside the United States. And we will email it to them along with further instructions, and we will CC you as well. Okay, so some things to keep in mind, both you and the J1s, that we need to be kept in the loop about. It's very important. Again, our office is, designated as the program sponsor for the J1 program, but you are kind of our eyes and ears in the departments. So we only have as much information that you convey to us. So one of the important things is if during the course of their stay, a J1 decides to leave or is not going to be here any longer for what, please update IPEN to show that they are withdrawing from the program. We can then take the action of shortening their CVIS record and shortening their DS 2019 form. Overseas travel, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the subsequent slides. Address reporting, again, this is regulatory from the J1 federal regulations. Any changes to their US residential address, the J1 needs to update in IPEN. So once we have that information, we can then in turn upload it to CVIS. The J1 program is, again, this is one of the regulations that they have to make sure they are maintaining. They're informing us of their residential address or any changes to it at any time. If a J2 is coming with the J1 and they depart, they're leaving permanently, they are no longer going to be in the United States, the J1 needs to notify us of that as well. And finally, incidents or allegations such as hospitalization or legal issues or anything that could bring notoriety or disrepute to the J-1 program, that all needs to be submitted to us. On the forms and memos page of the ISS website, there is a link with a form where you can put in writing what exactly the incident was. Some examples might be if someone is hospitalized for over 48 hours, we need to be notified of that. If someone has lost their passport or had it stolen, we need to be notified of that. If there is a DUI or DWI incident, anything having to do with legal ramifications, these are all the things that we would need to be notified of. If you have any questions, if an incident rises and you're not sure if it's a reportable activity, then feel free to reach out and we can have that discussion. Verification requirements. So you are periodically sent reminders to go in and validate or verify that the J-1 is still here. Please do so because that helps us know that the person is still here. It informs you if the person is still here or not as well. And if not, again, notify us. Okay, so remote work and absences. So per the Department of State, J-1 exchange visitors are expected to be in the United States, predominantly in the United States, at their primary site of activity. So the primary site of activity is indicated in box 1 of the DS 2019 form. That is where they should be located a majority of their time while they're participating in the program. Remote work full-time remote work is not allowed either within the US or outside the US. And remote work is actually limited to 2 days a week maximum per week from their home. Okay. And the reason behind that is in order to be facilitating an educational and cultural exchange, they want people on the premises interacting with individuals. Virtual is all good and fine, but they want that in-person experience. Department of State wants that the exchange visitor to experience that in-person experience. Any absences for like FMLA reasons, please reach out to us so we can have that discussion. A J-1 really is not at liberty to take time off. They can have vacation time or sick time that's accrued and coming to them, that's fine, but they really can't take a leave of absence within the United States or outside the United States for that matter, unless there's like a medical reason tied to it. And again, we would look at that in the case-by-case basis to see what exactly is involved in that. But keep that in mind too. The whole purpose of the J program is that they're here participating in the program. Okay, so absences from the US. So if someone is planning to be outside the United States for more than 30 days, there has to be a bona fide research component tied to that. They are not at liberty to say, you know what, I'm going home. I got like a 40-day, I've saved up my vacation time. I've got 40 days. I'm going home for 40 days. The Department of State has said anyone who's outside the United States without authorization or is not participating in the J-1 program for longer than 30 days, it's considered a discontinuation of their program objective and grounds for the program sponsor, Penn, ISSS, to end their sponsorship. So some examples where we have been able to, work with the department to say, yes, what they're doing overseas is a continuation of their J-1 program activity, include, they have to use an archives overseas. There is one person had research in the Arctic she was conducting. She was, I think, in atmospheric sciences or something. So she was going to be there for 2 or 3 months. That's fine. We can document that. We have to know about it prior to their departure. Please don't submit this once they've gotten back. That's a problem. We need to know about this up front. Likewise, GSSS, Global Support Services, they also need to be informed about this. And they have a work abroad request on their portal that would need to be submitted by the either you as the Penn administrator or the PI. Okay, so the two steps would be the scholar submits an out-of-country notification, e-form and IPEN explaining the PI would need to provide a letter that explains what they're actually going to be doing outside the United States that is required for them to physically be there. It can't be that, I'm waiting for a visa and I'm just working remotely. That doesn't qualify. So again, it's got to be a bona fide. Um, Absences, again, for longer than 30 days cannot be solely for personal reasons. Also, multiple periodic absences are not allowed. Again, it goes back to someone has to be predominantly in the United States at their site of activity listed on the DS 2019, participating in the J program, their activity to maintain their visa status. So someone who comes in back and forth, they might be here for 3 weeks, then they're gone for 3 weeks. They're back for 3 weeks, they're gone for 3 weeks. That doesn't work. Again, predominantly in the United States to maintain their J-1 visa status and the principle behind the program. Okay, occasional lectures and consultations. This is kind of a busy slide. Just keep in mind that is something that we can entertain. Again, we need to know about this prior to them undertaking any activity like that. I've had many emails saying, "Hey, I went and gave a lecture at MIT. Now they want to like reimburse me." No, you can't accept it because you didn't get authorization from us up front. So it's really important that we have notification in advance in writing. Again, there is an e-form in IPEN that the J-1 can submit an application request for. And then we can, work with the J-1 and allow that authorization as long as it aligns with their J-1 program activity. Okay, so the person's here. They've been participating in the program. Their DS 2019 is going to be expiring in a little bit. Just again, allow sufficient time to submit the IPEN in advance. Sometimes it's not necessarily 3-4 months in advance, but if you get the contract to renew them or the documentation is coming through that far in advance, that's fine to submit it. Better too early as opposed to too late, because once that end date of their DS 2019 form is met, it's too late. We can no longer extend their sponsorship. Okay, someone may be transferring their J-1 program to another university. That's fine. But they must be maintaining their original program intent. Has to be in the same category. So if they're a research scholar here, they have to be transferring as a research scholar. They can't go beyond that maximum limit in their particular visa category. And you can't have a gap between programs. So meaning if their last day here at Penn is March 31st, then they have to start at the new institution on April 1st. Can't be April 2nd or April 3rd. It's got to be a seamless transfer. We can also entertain applications if someone is moving from one Penn department to the other. But again, we need that application from the new department in advance of that change happening in Workday or actually going into effect with the scholar at the new location. Everything needs to be in advance so we have time to review it and approve it. Otherwise, they can be participating in a program without authorization, and that's the problem. Okay, travel. If someone is here and they're participating in the program and they want to go back home or wherever, that's fine. These are some of the things that they are required to have in order to re-enter the United States in J-1 visa status. So they have to have the travel validated DS 2018, which would be signed by our office. That signature for travel is valid for 12 months from the date of signature. They have to have that valid J visa I was referring to that is still going to be valid at the time of reentry to the United States. If it's not, they're going to have to use that travel validated DS 2018 to apply for a new visa at the U.S. consulate. Be mindful of the time frames or time constraints that are involved right now in visa renewal. Again, each consulate's a little bit different, but be mindful of that. They also have to have an unexpired passport. Speaking of constraints, this administration has been announcing travel bans on both immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas. Immigrant visas are basically people who would be coming in as permanent residents or green card holders. Non-immigrant is, the A through Z visa classifications. J-1 is a non-immigrant, such as an H-1B, B-1. Those are all non-immigrant classifications. So the top tier are countries that there's a travel ban for both immigrants, so green card people, green card holders, and also for non-immigrants. So all non-immigrants would be denied J visas at this point from these countries. The second tier, it's not all non-immigrants are banned, but they wouldn't be able to get a J. So the people in the second tier, really for Penn purposes, they'd be eligible for H visas, but not for J's, because that is the list of non-immigrant classifications that have been banned for those countries. Okay, dependents, just keep in mind for dependents that if you are going to hire a J2, that they have to have an employment authorization document in order to be employed at Penn. Even volunteering, I wouldn't necessarily have anyone volunteer as a J2, because anyone who is volunteering in a position for which a U.S. worker could be paid could be construed as a violation of the Department of Labor laws. So be very mindful of that. Okay. So the individual has finished their activity. They are going to depart the United States. It might be a little bit earlier than anticipated. If their end date on their DS 2019 is June 30th, 2026, but they found another position overseas, they're leaving April 1st, then please update their IPEN record to reflect that new end date. And so we will shorten their DS 2019 form and their CVIS record to reflect that end date. If they are acquiring another visa classification, like they changed to H-1B effective April 1, again, let us know. You would think we would know that, but especially if they're going to another employer, we wouldn't necessarily know that. But again, we want to make sure the DS 2019 reflects their end date of that sponsorship period. And then same thing with the green card, or if they've got an alternate employment authorization, just keep us mindful, because that way, again, as program sponsor, we are charged with monitoring the individuals. And if they're no longer in J-1 status, we don't want to have an active CVIS record on them. So we need documentation to update that. And then finally, departure from the program. If they are going home, they have a 30-day grace period by which to depart the United States. During that time, they can no longer participate in the J-1 program activities. They're basically here just to pack up, see the sights, and then go home. Okay. And let's see, the host department should consult prior to changing any terms and/or conditions of the J-1 scholars stay at Penn. Yeah, so if there are any changes to the J-1 during their stay here at Penn, just feel free to reach out. But again, reach out to us prior to those changes taking place. And I think that was the last one. Yep, connect with ISSS. So I am going to ask you all now if I can get to it. Make sure I can get to the chat box. If you have, if you could, at this point, oops. If you have any chat questions, if you want to place those in the chat box, I will be happy to answer them. Or let's see. Sorry, I'm doing this on my, they can also. Does anyone have any questions? Is everyone seeing the chat box? I'm not seeing any questions.
Irene, this is Karen.
Hi,
It
Karen.
says the chat is disabled.
Oh, Mike, are you there?
Yes, I'm
Mike
here.
is
We can
Mike.
do chat box. The Q&A is also enabled.
Oh, okay.
Or if you'd like, people can just raise hands and you can call on them. They can unmute.
Okay.
That's also an option.
I do have a question, Irene.
Sure.
And that is, you made a few references to IPEN.
Mm-hmm.
We're now using iHub, right?
Well, For J1s, good question, Karen. Right now, J1s are still through iPen. iHub is for H's when you're submitting. And then once we're probably going to have a pilot group for the J1s. And so we will invite people, if they want to be part of the pilot group, to submit applications in iHub.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I cannot see anyone's hands, so sorry, I'm technically challenged. Or if you want to try the Q&A, let's see. Okay, it looks like Mike has enabled the chat box, so that's open now. If anyone wants to, or I can't, I'm sorry, guys, I don't see like where I can see your hands. So if someone just wants to unmute and ask a question, feel free to do that as well. Everything is perfectly clear? No questions?
Irene, I have a quick question.
Sure.
In the past, when we had a person who was in the U.S. on a valid J-1 visa and was transferring to Penn for the English language certification, there used to be a drop down where you could say already in the U.S. on a valid J-1, but that's no longer an option?
Right. Yeah, we made the decision, and I will share with you, I've had conversations with J1s who have transferred in or have just arrived, and this was before kind of made changes to the English language, and their English was not sufficient. And so that's why we kind of made some changes. Even if they were at another school, the other school might not have done due diligence as much as we would like to do. So that's why we're asking it to be done again.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And Mike, PowerPoint will be on the website, right?
I will be sending a copy of both the recording and the PowerPoint itself out to everybody who registered.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. I have two questions. One, if a scholar is currently in the U.S. on an F1 OPT, can they apply for a J1 visa inside the U.S. to start their position at Penn? What will that process look like? Two, is the 30-day grace period for the J1s only after the program ends, or can it be used before the program starts as well? So they are allowed a 30-day grace period to enter the United States prior to the start date on their DS 2019 form, but they should not undertake any activity until that start date is met. Likewise, or alternately, they have a 30-day grace period after the end date of their DS 2018, or based on the end date of their activity, whichever comes first. So going back to that same example, June 30 is the end date of their DS 2019 form, but their last day at Penn is April 1st. They have 30 days from April 1st to depart the U.S. Regarding your first question, if they're here on an F1 and want to change to a J1, some of the things we'd want to look at is like, what is their intent? Just because as a J1, you have to demonstrate it's not your intention to remain here permanently. So we'd probably want to know a little bit more about the F1. Do they have any plans to stay in the United States for a long time or immigrate here? If so, probably not a great candidate for a J1 because it's kind of contradictory to the principle of the J1 program. If they're like, yeah, I've run out of my OPT and I'm not eligible for an H, yes, we can entertain sponsorship as a J1. And they would have to process it one of two ways after we issue the DS 2019. So they'd either need to depart the United States, apply for a J1 visa, and re-enter the U.S. in J1 status, or they would have to file a change of status through U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And that change of status, they can pay an extra $2,000 for premium processing. I think they're supposed to process it within like 15 business days. When I say process, doesn't necessarily mean approve, but, review it. So there are ways, but we'd probably want to know a little bit more about the F1's background and whether they're a really good fit for the J1, because we don't want to put them in a position where, you know, a J-1 just isn't the right type of option for them. Not sure if I answered your question, but I guess so. All right. Any other questions? We've got 4 minutes left. So I can't say that this was a clear presentation. So any clarifying questions or additional questions? As I mentioned, you know, Trilby, we're setting that up right now. I'm testing it for J-1 applicants and for business administrators to use. So we will have a pilot group that we're going to have test the J-1 application. We'll work with you closely. And then at some point, like the H-1s, we open it up for everyone to use. So that will hopefully happen sometime this summer. The pilot group first, and then followed by the opening it up to everyone. Sorry, my voice is going. Any other questions? Oh, thank you, Karen. Well, thank you for listening to me today with my creaky voice. I was thinking Jeremy usually is, you know, like more of a showman than I am. I just kind of rush through things, and he's like sits back and takes his time. We're a good team. So I'm just getting thank yous. You're welcome. I appreciate all that you guys do. I know you have, you're getting pulled in a gazillion directions as well. So I really appreciate your thoroughness and your professionalism in listening to us and helping us. And hopefully we're helping you as well. So appreciate that. Okay. Well, if no one has any other questions, I'll give you back 2 minutes if you want. Does everyone agree with that? I feel like I didn't do a thorough job. There aren't enough questions. All right. All right, everyone. I will sign off then. I'll give you 1 more second, see if any more questions come in. Tick, 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 tick. Trying to think of other things to say. Oh, here. We have the QR code. So feel free to give us a rating, or again, if this is, you know, you want to see more information in the presentation or different information, this is a great opportunity for us to, you know, see what exactly it is you're looking for and how we can better serve you. So I'll give you that time to do the QR code snap. And yeah, your feedback is really appreciated and helps us obviously fine line these presentations. All right. Well, guys, it's been real. It's 4 o'clock. So I thank you for your time and attention. And I wish you well. And thank you, everyone. Have a good day.